Okay, so hello everybody. We are here for episode 4 of Visibility in Action. I can't quite believe we've got here already, and I still don't know what I'm doing. So if that's starting to show, brilliant. I'm joined today by Evan Patterson, who, amongst many things, is senior BDR at Reprise. We don't quite know how to pronounce that. Could be either, and the coach SDR Nation as well. So. If you want to give us a quick intro to yourself, which is always the most awkward thing in the world to be asked to do, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
So Evan Patterson, people call me Evan or Ev, or just don't call me late for drinks. I really don't care. And you said it pretty much. Senior BDR at Reprise, coach at SDR Nation, big social selling fan. Try to teach people as much as I can about that. And then also talking about, having PTSD in the workplace and also being LGBTQ in the workplace and being poly in the workplace.
Yeah, excellent. And this, I think, is going to be an interesting discussion for many reasons. We've got a couple of things, obviously, we want to kind of focus the conversation around, but you are also the first kind of non-engineering, non-manufacturing person to be involved in the project. So STEM obviously is a huge area, and tech is a big part of that. So be interested to see if there's different themes come up as a result of that. Maybe a sort of more modern industry to a degree, but I'm sure you'll have
depends on who you ask.
Well. Yeah, I thought you'd say that. So we'll get into a couple of the other areas that we kind of have planned to talk about, but initially I think the place to start is why I'd kind of reached out to you in the first place, which was spotting a number of your posts on LinkedIn. You mentioned you're an advocate for social selling, and I'd seen a lot of your posts having not been connected to you, interestingly. And there was one in particular that struck me as, well, disgusting actually, which was that an entirely unrelated post about social selling resulted in you getting, amongst other things, homophobic messages on LinkedIn when it was not mentioned in the post and irrelevant to the subject. So I thought we'd start there because it's, something that I think most people probably don't have to deal with. And I was intrigued to know, one, how you did deal with it, and how frequently it happens as well.
Yeah, both good questions. So it does happen more often than I think people want to realize, but it comes and goes in spurts. Because it also, I think it's partially dependent on the controversial nature of the original piece of content. Right. So that first post that has since been deleted, the one you've seen is still there, but the post that it is referencing has been deleted because it was an abnormally high amount of responses that were negative. Isn't the issue. It was the negative and homophobic was the issue. Nobody said anything in the comments, which only adds to the stupidity of it all. And if you're offended by this, if the shoe fits. But the whole point of it was not to start like a war with anybody. It was about demo versus discovery. To your point, completely irrelevant to my sexual orientation. And people like to, I guess, use any card that they can or they have reached to, even if it doesn't make any sense. It's kind of like showing up to a literal war and then like all you've grabbed was like the spatula, like because that was the closest thing to you. Like not going to help you. Completely irrelevant. Probably going to actually do you a lot of harm actually in the process. Except the spatula was calling me every homophobic slur in the book as a way to. It wasn't even like it was weird. They didn't even start there. It was all used as justification as to why I don't know what I'm doing.
Interesting.
So they would start with "you're wrong" because insert slurs here.
Wow. Okay. That is something we shouldn't, but it's something we do expect from, Twitter and Instagram and these places. But LinkedIn is a strange place for that to happen because it is, as the professional platform. So these people are doing that in the guise of their kind of professional self. So, the kind of position that they're putting their employer in there is really awkward because that's going to taint your view of that company now as well. It's just
for sure
the horrible thing to be receiving in the first place.
the worst part of it is like when it comes to handling it, like, my gut reactions, like screenshot this, send it to your employer.
Mhm.
Um, it's difficult because, well, almost all the time, this is the dark truth. It's the owner. It's
Wow.
the C-suite. It's the VP level and up. It's
Mhm.
seldomly an IC, or individual contributor, in case people don't know that acronym. Like, it's very shocking to me that I usually don't have many people upwards to
Mhm.
go after. And if I do, it they're going to be a lot more lenient because getting rid of that person can be incredibly expensive and detrimental. And like I get it. Like, I work in the land of VC backed startups. We're not profitable for the first 5 to 10 years of our existence, if ever. I
Mhm.
get it. Like, there's a money component. So like there's limitations in what they can afford to do when it comes to reacting to these things. Um, but at the same time, like, then don't hire them in the first place.
Well, yeah, this is it. And, I don't want to spend too long talking about, those kind of horrible things, really, but it links really nicely into the topic of vetting an employer. And actually, you
Mhm.
talk about it mostly coming from, leadership and C-suite. That's where those types of messages are coming to you from. Those are the people leading, hiring and recruitment drives. And since we had our first chat before, committing to recording, it got me thinking, what you were talking about in terms of vetting your latest employer and making sure it was going to be a safe space, an inclusive space. It got me thinking that I had been doing that implicitly, throughout hiring
Mhm.
processes that I'd been through in the past without it really being kind of front of mind. And I think that's something every single LGBTQ plus person does, whether we realize it or not. So how did you go about that? And was it explicit? Were you making your potential employer aware that's what you were doing, or how did that work?
Yeah, when I was younger, like at 20, 21, 22 years old, I would say, I used to be a lot more sly about it. I used to kind of just go with my gut reaction. Didn't really ask anything. I didn't really do anything to like make it obvious.
Yeah,
Um, Other than the fact that like I do kind of fit quite a bit of the stereotype. So part of me was just like hoping that like they would just take the hint, you know? And by them hiring me, that was their like way of also
yeah,
acknowledging it, I thought. But that's shot me in the foot quite a few times. So as I, got more experience with this, um, I used to, like, when they would make small talk or they wanted to get to know about your personal life or whatever, nobody ever asked me questions about like, do you have any partners or what are your lifestyle plans or whatever, or do you plan to own a home or whatever, because it's illegal to ask those questions here in the States.
yeah.
But you can volunteer that information as much as you want, though, as the
Uh,
as the interviewee. So therefore, I would squeeze into conversation anything that would very obviously demonstrate that I was at the very minimum not straight. Um, I would fall under the category of like queer LGBTQ.
mhm.
And whether that was like, oh, how was your weekend or whatever? Oh, my boyfriend's also to drop that I was poly in the conversation. Went to insert very obviously known to be gay location nearby. Even if I didn't go, I would purposely lie, make
Yeah,
that up as
yeah.
a way to test their reaction. Um, and Now that was when I was working in smaller like insurance agencies. Now working in tech and also with like remote work becoming more normal, I flat out just ask, like, and I will say, like, as a openly gay polyamorous man, I want to know about your DEI initiatives or the company's culture on that, and which is
Mhm.
actually very difficult in startups because they're not like a Google, right? They're not going to have like thousands of initiatives and plans going forward. I'm
Uh,
more looking for the values and the how they live their day to day.
Exactly. It's the answer that's more important than the process. Sometimes, the smaller the company, the less process they'll often, be able to have in place. But no, that completely makes sense. And one of the themes that's coming through in these conversations actually is when people are starting their career, they don't have the self-confidence to be that visible. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time are kind of subconsciously looking for that kind of validation that this is a safe space, even in the knowledge that perhaps they can't qualify out opportunities because they're earlier in their career. It's almost that feeling that you have to take what you can get, even if it might actually be damaging to you in the long term. And I think a lot of people have been through that, where the first, 1, 2, 3 roles they've had have actually been in places that just weren't suitable, weren't that kind of safe, inclusive space. And that's when they start explicitly, making those checks for the next role. And that can be quite dramatic as well.
Yeah, I wish I knew a alternative, to be completely honest. Because I think you and I both can agree. You mentioned it yourself, like it can be very detrimental in the long term. It can create, you can literally sign yourself up for some obstacles and hurdles by not doing these things in the interview process. One thing that I have encouraged people to do that isn't an end all tell all be all solution, it does take some gutsiness, is like go on LinkedIn and find somebody who works at the company who has the job title that you would have if you're joining a team, or works like 1 degree away from the job title that you would get. Up, down, left, right, doesn't matter in the hierarchy. And just say like, hey, can I interview you about the culture, whatever? Like, I know you're not part of the process, whatever. If you like ask 5 people, at least one's going to say yes. And if nobody says yes, by the way, or nobody gets back to you about that, that in itself is a red flag. You shouldn't be working there. And if you are made to feel unsafe to bring this up in the interview process, and by the way, also bring it up in every interview. Don't bring it up in just the recruiter interview. Bring it up in every single step of the way. But like, if you are ever made to feel uncomfortable, and you can tell when you ask yourself, why am I uncomfortable? It's because of the other person or because of the company. I've never found a scenario where that was worth humoring, try to get over that discomfort. I either feel comfortable or I don't feel comfortable. It's just that simple. As long as you know you're already doing everything you can do, then you can just rest on your instinct a lot. Even if you know you might be wrong about it, you're still too many chances you're going to be wrong about it. Like, you don't want to don't keep going.
That first instinct is usually accurate.
Oh yeah, but so many things in life just go with your first instinct. So many things.
It's interesting, doesn't it? Because that comes to this whole topic of invisible diversity. For a lot of people, not everyone, but for a lot of people under the LGBTQ plus banner, we're only as visible as we choose to be very often.
Yes.
Not absolutely, but that's very often the case. And I wondered if the virtual world that we found ourselves kind of forced into more over the last year helps to that effect in a way, because it detaches you slightly from the process. It's very hard to put yourself in that potentially awkward and uncomfortable position when you're face to face with the people interviewing you. Whereas that initial kind of screening process now is more, more and more companies, that's a virtual process. And it might actually be easier to make those judgments and, question those instincts in that process, because you're not then face to face staring at someone who's potentially offering you a job, which is hard to turn down.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I think it's like why people are like, look at, to the point really about trolls, right? Like, they're not going to say this stuff to my face. You know that. You and I both know that. They're only saying it because there's a screen between us, right? So that same logic of being more comfortable or confident because there's a screen between you, I think we all be lying if we didn't acknowledge that is playing a massive role in people's confidence in some context, right? Like it's got its negatives, but it definitely has its positives. And the positive is people can just click leave. They can just click block. Everything's solved in the click of a button. You can't do that in real life. Well, or maybe not as easily. I am somebody that is equally comfortable in real life and online, but that's just because of who I am. I know that's not most people. I actually have to tone myself down online because I worry about context not conveying correctly. So I am not the right person to ask about how to deal with this, because I have the opposite issue where I do literally objectively need to tone it down. For nothing to do with bigotry or ignorance. I am just a lot to handle. So regardless of my gender identity or orientation, I am just a lot.
You're
So
vetting for that as well, then.
yeah, there's that too, to be completely honest. Like, I don't work at large established bureaucratic companies for all the reasons we've just spelled out, you know?
Yeah.
Even if a large company is as pro LGBTQ as possible, the chances of you having a chunk of that company still not adhering to that,
Statistically,
yeah.
very likely. Yeah.
Yeah, so I am more likely to work at a startup where 100% of the company is going to fall under one of two categories: very pro LGBTQ, or could not possibly care less in the best context possible. Also,
Yeah.
by the way, I love when people are not ignorant because they don't want to learn or because they um, are hateful, but they're ignorant because they have not had a need to learn, because they just don't, like, it's your, whatever you do is fine by you. I don't really care. I support you and love you regardless. That is the best type of ignorance. Love that kind of ignorance. It's refreshing.
I mean, that's
So,
the ideal scenario, isn't it? That's what you
yeah.
wish everybody was like.
Well, that's how I feel at Reprise. People fall into one or two buckets. There's no, the third bucket of like straight up bigotry, or hatefulness, or making me feel uncomfortable, even by accident without maliciousness. This doesn't happen.
Yeah, and that's interesting as well when you look at, diversity as a whole. It's obviously far easier the bigger the company to show that you have representation from certain communities, because statistically you are bigger, you are more likely to attract a bigger talent pool to apply for your roles. But that diversity existing as a demographic in your workplace doesn't necessarily mean that you are inclusive, you are open, it's equitable. For a smaller company, and I can use Solutions Driven where I work as an example, there's 30 of us. To my knowledge, I am the only LGBTQ plus person working there, but the openness, the inclusiveness is so plain to see that doesn't matter. Now, for other, communities, that might not be the same thing. It might be different for people with disabilities, people of color. There's obviously other issues to get into there. But I think for us, being the only one isn't necessarily a bad thing as long as that openness is there.
Yeah, I typically don't care if I'm the only one or not. It's more about the other factors, right? Because there was a diversity is like how many is having the crayons in your crayon box, and inclusion is using all of them to paint a picture or draw a picture, right?
Yeah,
so
it's a good analogy. I like that.
Yeah. So I like always looked at it as, how am I feeling in this? Also, even with invisible diversity, if there's other types of diversity in the company, either visible or invisible, like that alone makes me feel safe. Like if I see a lot of people of color in a company, if I see a lot of women in a company, and leadership specifically too, if I see people that are neurodivergent, that made it known, obviously can't see it, but for lack of a better context, if there's other forms of diversity and inclusion very visible that aren't even my own, that alone is also like checking some boxes. Because if you're open-minded to a lot of these things, like I was gonna say open-minded because that makes it sound like you're going above and beyond. If you're doing the bare minimum, being a decent human being in regards to these contexts, then I should also be like an easy to include part too. It shouldn't take you any lift. You've already nailed it, So like that's part of it. I've also been the first diverse hire before. And that's just based off the vibe you get with talking to the people that work there. I've been in a company where like it was literally 7 of us and 6 were straight white guys, straight white cisgender men. And I felt perfectly fine there. Not because of, just solely because of the relationship I had with the people that were there. So yeah, diversity quota can only do you so much. It needs to be the inclusion.
Totally agree. And particularly with the small teams, and particularly in startups where, the first group of people are typically, in many cases, college friends who stumble across a new idea or some new tech. And because they kind of all know each other to begin with, can already seem to be quite homogenous. But it's their approach to hiring that I think is important, or willingness to learn as well.
And there's a balancing act.
Definitely.
You got to hire people to fill the roles ASAP. I get it.
Yeah.
Like diversity is an afterthought at that point. I get that. I think any of us can agree. But it's like that will only take you so far. Like to throw it out the window. Like once you get to like 10, 20 employees, and especially in SaaS tech startups, like you have no more excuses. This needs to be ingrained in everything that you're doing.
It does. And I do think it's harder for startups, or at least for smaller teams, because very often, you may look further behind than the bigger companies on that diversity journey, but it's not the case. It's just, you don't have an HR team, so there isn't a process,
Yeah.
But at the same time, maybe can't afford to pay quite as much as the unicorns out there. So finding the right person at the right value can often be the immediate priority. And I'm speaking, from a recruitment perspective, working for a
Yeah, you
recruitment
definitely
company.
would know.
That's always the priority. But what's really encouraging is that more and more businesses are bringing this topic up in conversations. And it's something we're driving is to say, let's talk about that. Do you have a diversity agenda and inclusion agenda at the start, rather than waiting till a shortlist is presented to you and go, it's 5 white guys. We wanted a bit more variety than that. Well, tell us at the beginning. And it's encouraging to see more people talk about that. And if you have candidates like yourself who are really, really visible and loudly saying, this is, other than my professional self, the other part of me, making sure that that's, safe.
Yeah.
Whatever better word, then it's only going to continue the change, I suppose.
Yeah, I think the only there's the other side of the coin though of being this loud. Like it does a really good job of being this visible. I use loud because I am, but being this visible is it's great for the vetting, right? It's fantastic for avoiding signing up for a lot of mess. I carry this logic in my personal life. This has also just been how I've been since I was a little kid. I take very much after my mother. My mother is the same way. She's like, I want to know if I don't like you as soon as freaking possible. That's how she used to say it. So with a lot more colorful language. But so like that's just been who I am. But there is a negative though. The negative is I've literally have been offered jobs, never said yes, but offered jobs solely, and I know this because it's been verbatim when they offered me it, because I'm gay.
Yeah.
Or because I'm poly, or because I have PTSD, or some cocktail combination. It's then you're literally getting hired for the sole purpose or the primary purpose. Because I don't want to assume that they didn't see all the other stuff they could get from me hiring me. But like, if that's your number one reason for hiring me is because I am a diverse candidate, that is just as offensive as not hiring me because I'm a diverse candidate. I'm not a token. It goes back to like, it's not so much an issue, at least where I live, as much as it used to be, but you would go to a bar or you would go to a party and you would always get like that straight white cisgender girl that wants to be your best friend solely because you're gay. So she just needs a small purse, a small dog in the purse, a crop top, and a gay best friend on her arm, and she's ready to go. Right? Like you're just another accessory at that moment, right? That culture has died quite a bit now, thank goodness. At least in my experience, can't speak for everybody. But that's how I feel when people in job interviews they'll go out of their way to like paint a picture about it so much, like it's come off way too strong about it. And I've had people like, we want to market you in this gay publication and this gay publication. Like, dude, I didn't even bring it up.
Yeah, it's an extension of that tokenism you see, and we're just coming up to Pride Month. The rainbow capitalism, as they call it. Just let's shove a
Keep
rainbow
that eye
of
roll
stuff
in.
It's just an extension of that, isn't it? And I think that applies to any aspect of diversity. Making it a tick box may seem like you're putting in the effort, but you're putting in the effort in the wrong way. You're making it seem like a task to be done rather than something that's actually going to improve your company as well. Because all the research says, backs up that more diverse teams perform better, are more productive. That's what they should be talking about.
I always say, are you looking to hire a diverse team, or are you looking to have inclusive hiring practice? Because there's two very different things. One is literally a quota. One is what you think you're doing, but you're not.
Definitely. And I mean, there's an argument for that kind of positive discrimination. And, you know, we see people asking for 50-50 gender split shortlists and things like that quite frequently. And there's an argument for that level of positive discrimination so that at least a shortlist, if you're hiring, is deliberately diverse. But never use that as the reason you've hired somebody.
Yeah,
You know,
I do agree with having a like we want a percentage of our staff to be
Mhm.
to some degree diverse. I do have an issue of how some companies define diverse. They tend to ignore invisible diversity. Also, diverse you can be a straight cisgender white guy and be neurotypical and
Yeah,
everything in the book. But let's say you didn't go to college and you're applying for a role that historically
yeah,
required a college degree. And whether you went to college, didn't go by choice, or you didn't go due to lack of accessibility, especially here in the States, how expensive it is. I didn't go by choice. You know, I went for a week and like this sucks. I don't like this, y'all. Yeah, which is fine. You have to, if you created your own path and you are qualified, you have all the same exact abilities as the person with the degree, you are worth the same amount of money, X, Y, and Z, as that person on paper.
yeah.
That is diversity. Also,
It is.
upbringing is diversity.
Yeah,
People's childhoods are diversity. If somebody came from half of the poverty line, that is diversity. I think not that you can ask those questions in an interview, but those are also things that people need to include when they're coming up with a hiring plan is people's lifestyles, people's past lifestyles,
Mhm.
all those things.
No, absolutely. And I think that's why it can look like such a daunting topic for businesses who've maybe not
Oh, for
formally
sure.
looked at it before, because where do you begin? And I think that's why you do find a lot of people focusing on gender or focusing on race, for example, because there's at least a level of understanding that already exists there. But then
It's
when
a
you
little
start,
more concrete feeling, I want to say. I
exactly,
want to say black
yeah,
and white because it's not. It's more tangible.
yeah, exactly. People already have a lived experience of, gender differences, racial differences. So that's something I think people can grab hold of quite easily, but quite quickly, and at least feel like they're making an effort and making some changes. But when it comes to things like invisible disabilities, when it comes to LGBTQ issues, when it comes to neurodiversity, as you said, it's really, really tough for people to try and get to grips with that, particularly if they've no lived experience of it as well. And that's why getting representatives from those communities, I think, is always really important as well. I mean, when we're talking about LGBT plus representation in STEM, one of the other things, and it's probably an interesting kind of question to finish up on, is, like I said at the beginning, you're the first person in this project who's coming from the tech side of STEM as opposed to engineering and manufacturing, which is maybe seen as a bit more traditional, a bit more, conservative, and perhaps has a little bit further to go in terms of making those changes. From that kind of startup, scale up type experience, do you think that tech is further ahead, or do you actually think there's maybe an assumption there that's dangerous?
I would actually beg to say that I think it's further ahead. I don't know by how much. I would seem like a more legacy company, a more established company. Um, the the older, for lack of a better word, the company gets, the more likely it's going to have an issue
Mhm.
in the categories we've discussed. But the newer I've noticed, it's either ingrained from day one because they're being built and constructed as a entity during this being a number one priority, or at least in the short top three list, right?
Yeah.
There's also the other component with like the VC funding, like they're all funded, right? They're not profitable. They can't afford to be anything other than inclusive and diverse. It's also just good business, right?
Yeah.
Like if we really want to talk numbers, like diversity and inclusion and equity is just good business at
Mhm.
the end of the day. It's
Yeah.
so it will drive you more revenue. So they can't afford to not have DEI in place from day one anymore. They will set themselves up for failure. Already 4 out of 5 startups like doesn't make it past year 5 or 6. If I remember those stats correctly, somebody please correct me.
Yeah,
But
I think that's about right. Yeah.
yeah, but so like if you don't want to be part of that 4, you got to have the DEI from day one nowadays.
Completely. And some of that is down to, they'll die off because of, lack of revenue, etc. But a lot of it will because they're just not attracting the right people. to
Yeah.
help bring in that revenue. And again, from a recruiter's perspective, although I'm not a recruiter, we see now more and more in the last year has accelerated this. People asking early in hiring processes about that kind of thing, about DE&I projects, about training, internal mobility. All of these things are more important than ever to candidates. So if you're not thinking about how inclusive is this business right from the beginning, you're not going to get the right people wanting to work for you either. So it works both ways, really.
Yeah.
It's
I
nice
also
to
like
see
if you nail it, it'll have a domino effect in a good way, though.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It'll
Communities
get your
talk in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Well, I mean, we could go on and on, I'm sure. And there's loads of other things we could talk about. So who knows? Maybe he'll be back again if this becomes a long-term project. Who knows? Episode 4,
Totally up
he'll be
for
back
it.
for 30.
For a series or a season, after we had that debate out there.
I mean, if I say series, does that mean it has to end at some point? Is that
Yes.
the difference?
Yes, to an American, yes.
I'm just going to call it a series to annoy you now. I mean, it could be a series if it doesn't ever end. Like a season suggests surely I'll have 6 episodes, and the next year we'll have another 6. If they just keep coming and there's no stop to them, then
well, I hope your
still
viewers
works,
know
surely.
that when I do advertise this episode, I will refer to it as a season.
Okay, just don't use the word podcast.
I will make sure to use. I'm kidding. I won't do that.
In inverted commas at the very least. Anyway, listen, thank you for your time. It's been really, really good. And yeah, I'm sure if anyone has any questions about anything you've said, you won't mind them kind of reaching out. To you as well.
Hit me up on LinkedIn. You know my name. Just type it in.
Exactly. Thanks very much.
Thank you.